was really beautiful. My name is Millie Cantu, and my daughter goes to school with, or has gone to school with Tom's daughter. But I really wanted to speak to the legacy that Tom has left in being a father, and with Suzanne, parenting these 3 wonderful children. So Tim's here today, and he's clearly taking the lead, and I just want to celebrate you and just say how remarkable you are, Tim. I know you're with your mom, and just the legacy that he's leaving the next generation. We celebrate Tom.
Thank you, everyone, for sharing stories and for the music and for the songs and everything. Ernie, thank you for keeping everyone going. My dad had this saying, Joju-aku, birth, growth, decay, and death. That some of us die early in our mother's womb. Some of us die very young, as children. Some of us die as adults in the prime of health, strength, and others die in their later years. And that for all of us, death comes too soon. And there is really only enough time to be kind. A life like my father's is not easy to summarize. It's not easy to say goodbye to. And I know that no matter how long we carry this on, we can never encapsulate everything that was him. That's not easy. But I thank you for everyone who shared pieces of him. And for myself, to say I was close to my father was a bit of an understatement. From my earliest memories, he has always been there, teaching me, training me, pushing me. And even as I got older and began to travel myself, go all over this country and slowly outside of this country, my dad has always been there on the other end of the phone. People who've spent lots of time with me, who I've lived with, have seen this. They've seen, me on the phone with my dad continuously for hours, most days, in all phases of my life. So for me, imagining a world without Tom Kelly is not just saying goodbye to someone I love. It's trying to imagine an entirely different way of living. Because there's never been a point in my life where I haven't had him there. The last 6, 7 weeks, however long it's been, has been some of the longest, most difficult of all of our lives. And I just want to say how much I love my family very much, and how proud I am of all of them, and how glad I am I have them here. And that a friend of mine, Jesse Stagg, said that perhaps the best tribute we can give to Tom is trying to put in action many of the advice and suggestions he gave, and trying to live by that wisdom. My dad didn't always live by his own wisdom. And I understand that a lot of the frustration that we had with that man was how he could be so wise and yet not seem to follow his own advice. And I recognize that. But he also taught me and my brother and my family to learn from bad example as well as good. So I think he would want us to be able to look at him and his life and see both what to do and what not to do. But in this moment, on this day, it makes sense to look back at his life and try to think of a few things that we can take away. And so I came up with the idea that I'd write a whole eloquent speech. I don't really have that because I've been pretty busy. But I have some idea of what I want to say, so this might not be as polished as I usually like to be. But
you're doing all right
the three, thank you. 3 things I think, 3 things I think that I could emphasize as real lessons that I've learned from my father, deep lessons. And first is fearlessness. My dad didn't seem to have fear about even simple things like hey, you might need a house or like a car that works. But he didn't care, and he wasn't afraid to step into the most ridiculous situations. You know, we hear psychological stories of times when a crime happened and 40 people stood by and watched. Yeah, my dad was not among those 40 people when that happened, because he wouldn't let anything slide by. He would comment on everything, and that could be obnoxious. But I recognize that is a mark of incredible courage. For him to have enough confidence in himself to step in and try to do the right thing at any moment. And really, to not be afraid of death is something that is hard for any of us to imagine. And he wasn't. We did not think he was in danger of death at the hospital, but he had talked to me about death all the time. And partially because I was so close to him, I told him once, I can't imagine life without you. I talk to you almost every day of my life. I cannot imagine what it will be like when you are not here. And he said, don't worry about that. I'm not afraid of my death. You shouldn't be. I mean, you're doing a lot of things right already. When I die, just step up to the plate and try to hit one out of the park. For someone who's been to as many Little League games of mine, it seemed an odd metaphor. I was good at a lot of things as a kid, but I was not exactly renowned for my batting average, let alone my ability to hit them far. But I think that's almost better, because he would want it to be a challenge. And he was always challenging me. And he saw that as courage training. And so whether it was writing this book, or battling with the hospital, or just learning to live without him, he approved of those challenges. And challenging ourselves in any way we can is a form of courage and fearlessness. The second thing is a degree of selflessness. And I think this is fitting here, because he had a couple sayings that connect this. And one is, identify with the electricity, not the light bulb. This falls into some people that think my dad just read a lot of fortune cookies. But no, I think there's a lot to be said for that. And his other saying was, the day after you die, everyone will just keep going on. I think a lot of people misunderstood that as sort of like no one cares. Of course people care. This is proof how many people here showed up to honor his life and paid respect to us. But life still goes on. And if my dad were here today and he were watching this and he'd talk to me, he would say, hey, you have a friend out there who's about to get married next week. You have another friend who's going to become a father soon. Look at those things, the life that's going on. It's not just about me. It's about the bigger picture. It's not about the light bulbs. They can be taken on or put off or exchanged. It's about the electricity flowing through us all. It's about that greater story. That sense of selflessness, that perspective, I think is something I need to try for. And many people I meet do. I'm an egotistical person. That is a demon I wrestle with. Right. And that goes into the fact that it is all contradictions. But identifying with the bigger picture is something that, though he seems self-centered, he was very good at. And I think that's something that we can all work on. You know. And the last thing that I think I really want to take away from him is a willingness to learn from everything. And this might seem like a contradiction to the Tom Kelly that many of us know, because he always didn't seem like he was really listening. That could be a frustration. But when he was listening, he was constantly learning. And my brother and I growing up, my younger sister, our childhood was the craziest amalgamation of all these different lessons he had gotten from the whole world. So we might greet each other with a Turkish handshake, mahaba. We might do Native American courage training, Buddhist mysticism. We might do New York Jewish intellectual studious get down and hit the books. And then we might wish each other farewell with Inshallah, which is a Senegalese greeting or farewell. The fact is, he saw himself very much as a citizen of the world. And when he was explaining different religions to me and different ways of seeing the world, this was a very important moment in both of our lives. I was only about... And he sat me down and he explained, this is Christianity, and here's sort of ideas here, and Judaism, and Islam, and Buddhism, and Hinduism, and all these things. And I listened. I'm a pretty good student. Didn't get all the tenets, but I got a lot. And at the end, he was explaining what different people believe. And I asked him, what do we believe, Dad? And he said it just hit him, that was one of the moments of being a father when he is like, holy shit. And this person, this other human being, has this much faith in me that they're asking me something as essential as that. So he kind of fumbled with something. I'll get back. No, but he was good at ad-libbing it. So he said, I believe you need to love, trust, and respect yourself. And you need to try to have your word mean something. And you want to, if you can, leave the earth slightly better for your having been there. And beyond that, you have to figure it out for yourself. So I've been working on that assignment for the last 2 decades. I'm not a very religious person, too much of a scientist. But I am very spiritual, I think, in my own way. And part of the religion or sense of belief that I am building for myself is that the world is a story. That we go through this life and the most incredible things happen to us. Some are wonderful, and some are terrible beyond belief and tragic. And that all these things happen in a certain way because it makes the story more incredible. And when I imagine what happens after we die, where my father is now, I know I don't know. I know that. But I like to imagine sometimes that in that moment, or in those moments after death, that we begin to see a larger story of the world, that we perhaps start with our own life and look at all the people we touched, and that we see all the people who influenced us. And we see their stories coming into ours and their stories after they leave us. And then the people who influence them, widening, ever larger to see more and more of the world. I like to imagine that. Whether or not it's true, it's an interesting guide for how I live my life, to try to make it the best story possible. In the last few weeks, while writing this biography for my father, I've suddenly been re-amazed with what an incredible story he's had. And I like to imagine that now he's not only going to be able to look back on all those stories and see them wherever he is, but he's able to imagine all the stories yet to come. That he's going to see all the stories that we make, and our children and grandchildren, and what little tidbits we might have learned for him, or just how we try to lead our life in a good way, and how we pass that on. And so, after this, I just want us all to try to make that a good story. And if he is watching, let's try to give him a good show.
All right.